Come on. Makes you, I show my screen. And we're gonna hide webcams. Stop this. All right. You see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna show you on PWDev Web, but I'm not going to, so we don't mess around in the production server. But let me show you real quick of what you have on Hawk, which is going to be your bread and butter. There is the CAP admin, Falcon, and Hawk. Everybody has this little icon on their desktop. And yes, it is recording. Great. So this is one admin that is actually linked to 3 different CAPs. And what you need to do is select the CAP. After you double click on it, you select the CAP that you actually want to connect to. And you're doing that by selecting it from the drop-down. CAP 3536. The URL says CAP 35, but the CAP version is actually 36. We have CAP 371, and then we have the test CAP on Hawk, which you almost never will use unless you have a special assignment. So it's only going to be the first or the second. Okay?
Okay.
So let's go back to PWDev Web. So here, because it is my test environment, I have different CAPs. I don't even have the 3.5 set up. I have the 3.7.1, and I have separately the 3.8. So we're going to go into the 3.7.1. And this one also is actually set up to serve multiple ones, like Min's CAP. So if there's anything he has, I can actually hack into this CAP instead of having to log into his machine and run it from there. So you always got to make sure that the CAP server is pointing where you think it points to. Everybody could have their own admin login. Nobody does. Everybody is using mine. So you log in using K. Stevenson, and the password is password, all lowercase. Immensely tight security. Of course, if somebody screws up, I always get blamed because it's always logging me as the one who did it. But so the setup of the CAP is basically you have the application processor, which is a web service that has a web method, like standard setup, web service with web methods, and depending upon which web service request comes in, based on the web method in the request and the parameters, the CAP then executes whatever it's being told to do, if it can do so. Meaning, all of the items where the CAP is involved, actually the CAP only does something after a web request is sent to the CAP. If you run a sync, PowerWeb sends a web request to the CAP telling it which site it is and where it is supposed to get the data from and what the profile is, so it can, and that it's legit, so it can pull up the information out of the PowerWeb database and start the sync. If you transmit an order at the end, or if you place an order at the end of the order placement, the PowerWeb site sends a web request to the CAP that says transmit order, and it tells it the order number and the site, and the CAP gets all of the order information out of the PowerWeb database, formats it as XML, and sends it to Acumen. Same thing for B2B. PowerWeb tells the CAP with a web request, which is called order calc, to go and get the data from Acumen, and it gives it all the information it needs to be able to do so. So the CAP is kind of like doing its own thing there, but to be able to do it, it needs information about the individual sites that are connected to it. I told you in the past it is set up with a very, very good security scheme actually. And so we have several pieces that we have to fill in before a Power website can actually successfully give the CAP instructions on what to do. The top level of this whole security scheme is called an organization. An organization would be, for example, the company. It was intended a little bit different. We are using it that an organization is, in fact, the site, a publisher. So each organization has a profile, one profile, in which things can be set up that tell the CAP what it needs to know. For example, it tells the CAP what the sync database is that belongs to that site. It tells the CAP a whole bunch of other stuff that we decided should be controlled by the CAP. For example, it tells the CAP if the site actually has B2B or not. It's a flag that PowerWeb will only show you the B2B shopping cart if the CAP responds to an inquiry from the site saying, is this B2B or not? And only then will you ever see that shopping cart. So if you're trying to log into a site with a B2B account, you know it's a B2B account, and you don't see the B2B cart, chances are that the CAP profile is B2B false. It also has the information in there what the system DSN is that is being utilized for data transmission for the sync, and it has information in there if there is B2B, what the web server on the Acumen site is called and what the details are. So you have an organization and you have a profile with a whole truckload of stuff, which we're going to look into in just a few minutes. An organization can have also one or multiple parties. Party is simply a unlucky choosing of words for the name user. A party is a user. The person who wrote the CAP was a brilliant developer who completely, totally sucked when it came to interface design and usability. So it is a great technical framework. The usability stinks. So he called users party. So you can have multiple types of users. In general, we only types of users per organization. In general, we only set up one of type PowerWeb user, meaning it is a user that can be used for a PowerWeb site to authenticate itself to the CAP. You could set up, where I was saying, I'm the one who gets blamed for everything. You could set up for an organization, you could set up an admin user to be allowed to log into the CAP admin. So we have an organization in there that's actually called Cyberwolf, and I could set up a Rob Harrington account with admin rights that would allow you to log into the CAP admin under your own name. Would only take 5 minutes. We just never done it. It's always been, everybody has just been using mine. And at this point, I don't know, it's really pointless. So we got organization. We got parties that belong to organizations. There's one more piece, which is called the connection string, which is linking to the organization, and it tells the CAP, or it gives the CAP the ability to log into the PowerWeb database. Because the CAP has its own database, of course, And then if it wants to go into a Power Web database, which it has to, of course, if you want to run a sync, it has to log in, to figure out what the sync parameters are, what the parameters are in the server settings table that control the sync. And then, of course, it will have to give the sync routine the login to the Power Web database so the sync can put the data that it retrieved from Acumen into the Power Web database. Top level again, organization, party, connection string. Now the connection string and the party you can set up in either order, it doesn't matter. But first has to be the organization because it's the top level item. Alrighty.
Okay.
So after you log in, you see this empty screen here. And really, seriously, there are situations where the CAP admin will paint you into a corner because you get distracted for a minute. There are some certain ways to get out of this corner, and I need to find a document where I had Bushra document that one. I personally, when it keeps throwing errors and errors and errors, I personally just quit the damn thing and go back in. So I'm telling you a whole bunch of things that are really, really bad about that CAP admin. And you will see a bunch of things that are really, really bad about that CAP admin. So I think you will be very happy that we're working on a replacement for it, which is going to be a DNN module in the dashboard.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So we got organization, menu, development, totally ignore it. Configuration is where you will find the connection string stuff. System, totally ignore it. So it's just going to be ever organization or configuration. We said the first thing you need to set up is an organization. We're going to update organization. And there you see the first thing. Something comes up and then it disappears. So there are those tabs and then it kind of goes away again and you have to bring it up again. So you really got to play around it and fiddle around with it for a while to get used to it. So what we're doing, we're going to set a new let's call it RobCap. Organization ID, which has to be unique, is going to be RobCap. And in general, as you can see here, we don't give the organization a real name. We just use the same thing because in general, the name tells us anything that we need to know. And then we're going to go and say create new organization. So now we have this thing hanging here, but we actually need to go up there. And come on. There we go. Fiddle around, sooner or later that stupid thing will disappear. So you have Power Web. I clicked on Power Web here. So this is the role assignment where I was saying it's a Power Web user. Mm-hmm. It could be an administrator, but you'll see all of those are actually empty. We don't use them unless you set up a CAP admin account. So ignore this, but Power Web user has to be checked, and it's always by default. So the organization has this, and the organization can be linked to one or multiple websites. So technically, if a customer wants to run multiple Power websites that use the same data source on the back end and the same Acumen settings, they could use one profile. But since in general, even with Orca, some of those profile settings are actually different between the different sites and not just the URL, we have one URL per organization. With Power Web 10, there's a little wrinkle, is you set up two. You set up one for the development side, and you set up one for the eventual real-life production side. So when you switch from live to from test to production and use a different cert and you use a different URL, it's still working with a CAP. Then you don't have to go through that setup. So you can do that right in the beginning. How do you set up a URL? You click on New URL. You set up the URL, and please, I have to point this out. It assumes already in the code the HTTP://. So you do not want to set, you do not want to enter it. So let's just say robcap goes to robsite.powerwebbook.com. No HTTP upfront. If you have a www, it has to go in there, okay?
Mm-hmm.
There are certain circumstances where this is actually has a colon. In general, make sure you don't have that colon unless it is needed. And when it's needed, you'll probably be told because there is a setting on the Power Web site in the Power Web database that has to match whatever you enter there. This was supposed to be used by the sites automatically in the very beginning, where the code that integrated with the CAP, that's calling the CAP, was automatically determining the base URL of the site, and it was submitting that to the CAP as a secure way of making sure that only the right sites were actually able to even contact the CAP. Fact is that with some URL variations, it didn't work. And so what we ended up doing was adding a server setting into the Power Web settings that determines what the CAP call in the Power Web is using to submit. So you will find a setting that's called CAP authentication URL, which has to map the site URL in here, because when it gets a request, it looks up if it has that URL that is submitted in the request. Okay?
All right.
Application is always Power Web. Now, it is supposed to show here that you can actually commit, but for some dumb reason it doesn't do it. So you have to click on a text field and then it says show, and then you can save it. Aren't you glad that you know that this is going to be replaced?
Mm-hmm.
So we have robcap is now the top level. Now we can pull all of the other things into robcap. So I could first go and update a party and add a party, or I could set up the profile, or I could set up the connection string. Connection string is most often forgotten in the fray of things when you get busy doing the profile and everything else, which is why I got in the habit to do it as soon as I have the organization, I do the connection string. It has the ability to run multiple environments. QA, production, and dev. This setting has to map what the CAP, this particular CAP, is configured for in the own internal CAP configuration. On Hawk, it will always be production. Don't ever use anything else. Here on the test server, I'm using QA. And I can show you real quick, this is the actual CAP configurator that chances are you'll never get into. But there it says environment is quality assurance. So if it says, if it's adhere to QA, then it has to be, whatever you set up here has to be QA. No, it's not intuitive. But I have seen people saying, I can't, it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and they found they had the wrong environment setting in there. So always make it production in Hawk. Always make it QA on the test server. Think you can remember?
Yep.
Okay. So what we want a new connection string. And it brings up the connection string settings. So I have to give it the name of the database server. In this case, it's pwdev SQL. On production, when you have to set it up, you could put in Falcon SQL. However, IT actually has a URL kind of sort of for it. So if the name of the server ever changes, we don't have to update all the connection strings. And I encourage you to just look up an existing one and use that. I don't know what it is from the top of my head. Then we have a database name, and we just, for the heck of it, we're going to call it PW10QA PW. Actually, let's make it design PW. Nah. Come on. User ID is required. Logon ID is always website. And this is the database password for the database user. So this is not a logon ID into the site. This is the logon ID into the database. So it's the database user website with its password. Oh boy. Okay, Brent is saying about the MenoMedia ticket, total CF, and that does not mean Cold Fusion. So in fact, it is the script that we worked out in that returns 131 rows, means that 131 web product categories in the MenoMedia sites are CF'd.
Oh, I just got that.
All right, so this now is in the recording, of course, as I remembered a little too late. Keep the recording safe because this information here really should never get out.
Yep.
And maybe after we are done, you might want to just delete the recording so it's for you. But this is really, it's every Power Web database has to have as owner the database server, database user website, and that's the password for it. So you hit enter to make this darn thing go away. Notice that it put in a encrypted connection string here. If you want to see it, you actually have to double click on it. If you want to get out of it without changing anything, you click escape, or you hit escape. So now let's enter this. It's going to be QA. It's, come on, RobCap, Power Web, RobCap. This is not saved. Even when this one shows up nicely encrypted, this thing is not saved. You have to commit. So now we have RobCap in there, and RobCap is going to connect to PW10 Design database. Now what we have the pieces, we have the organization, we have the party, and we have the connection string. The last thing is going to be updating the profile. So go into organization, update profile, and then you have to select the organization from the drop-down menu. This is alphabetically sorted, thank God. It never used to be until I got a screaming fit. There's RobCap, and it brings up all of the information for the org profile. There's a whole truckload of stuff that you really don't have to fill in, and there are a few things that if you don't fill them in, they're going to kill you. So organization ID and whatever, you can just leave it. Organization info, just forget about it. With the exception, hold on, fault email, I think this is what it's sending it to, but just leave it to me until I complain and then we can figure it out. This here, default SMTP, forget about it. It's not needed. Order processing is misleading because in the beginning the CAP was only used for order processing when Jay wrote it. And then later on we decided to put the sync in there. And the developer that we had in Pakistan was not exactly the most competent, but he was the only one we had. And he didn't know how to put in a second, instead of order processing, put in a synchronization node. So he bunched it into the order processing as a subnode. And we kept going this way. So everything, pretty much everything you need is in the order processing. Rule set. This is something that is empty that you will need to fill in, to transmit orders to Acumen. You might want to remember, we touched on it, that the CAP is able to generate the order XML based on some logic in how to format and arrange the address information from the Power Web order. If you don't, please look up in the Acumen manuals specifically what it means to have a build to ship to address or dealing with locations. There are various ways how to organize the user information, how to organize the customer information in Acumen. We have sets, rule sets. Case 1, case 2, case 3. Don't ask me which one is which at this point. Almost all production sites are using the same. There are only a couple that are kind of different. I don't know right now which one is which. It would definitely be a really nice thing to actually catalog it. I'm in general using case 3. Brent knows exactly what case 2, case 3 means because he was the one who actually came up with this. And he knows from the top of his head. So if you want to cut a corner, you can actually ask him and then maybe document it in the wiki. Parameters are there, not used, but the rule set has to be followed. Now, one of the things where I said it's going to be really, really hard and you can get up really messed up is when you enter something and it shows red here, and then you move on to something else before you save it. It'll kind of cache it and it will carry this weird thing forward into the next. Wait, see, it shows, I clicked on Acumen email and it still shows case 3 for active. And if I try to save this, it will spit errors. You wouldn't believe it. So rule number 1 is whatever you do, whatever setting you do, you save. Okay, Don't tell me. Okay, now I got it. So don't move away from it. You enter and then you hit save. There are situations, and you will see it now, where it says it requires additional parameters. So you enter all the parameters that are needed, and then you click Save. Render View, ignore it. Fax, ignore it. Acumen Email. This is the one that determines how the CAP deals with order transmission to Acumen. First of all, by default, when you set it up, it's empty unless you set it to true or false. If it is set to false, there will never be any order transmitted to Acumen because the CAP will not do it. It will, Power Website will faithfully send order confirmation email, but the orders will never be transmitted because this one permits. We had that case just a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, where order, I don't know, was it Bolchese? Might have been Bolchese or somebody else, where this was set to false and no order email went out. Encryption method has to be, under normal circumstances, TEA. This is what the CAP uses to encrypt the email that it sends to Acumen. And as encryption key, it uses information that it retrieves from the send settings in the Power Web database. There are 4 fields with encryption keys, K1 to K4 or K0 to K3, I forgot. But it uses those to actually encrypt. If you setting this to none, it will send the order XML in clear text, which is massively helpful when you're trying to debug a problem, because you can redirect, you can set a Power Website to send it to yourself and send it in clear text, and then you actually see the order XML. However, since this is a setting that affects every single order on the site, you don't necessarily want to do that on a production site. This is something you use when you do some testing on a test site. Never, ever, ever touch this after a site goes live, because every single order that is placed is going to be screwed up. Notifications is when there are problems, it is the from address. In general, I have been using mine. It doesn't really matter. And where it sends problems to. And I think we have, under normal circumstances, PW support. But since this is a test server, let's just make it me. Little task for you, one of you guys. Go into a functioning production setup and document what is in there, so you know what needs to be set up for new ones. Retry attempts is a really, oh see, I did it again. I clicked on it, was in notifications, I didn't save it. I clicked on something else, and then it starts to bulk, and then we have to go back and we have to save the damn thing. So, retry attempts. This makes no sense for email. When the email is not sent, when the CAP doesn't send an order email because it fails for some reason, it will not try to resend. However, because of some really idiotic stuff that was done in the code by NetProcess a few years back, it is a required parameter to set up, even for email notifications or email for the Acumen email. If you do not set this up in your testing, or when you set up a site and you forget this, and you're running your first few test orders, there will be no order email, and you will see a nasty error in the CAP that is talking about an invalid time value, which when you're looking at it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever unless you remember that, if I see that error, I better go back and check if I have my retries. So what we are doing is the time delay for attempt, we are setting to something like 1. We save it, where 1 means 1 minute. And the even nastier one is delay retry attempts, which is functionality that Brent had insisted upon when we wrote all of this, and then it was never used, and then he said he hated it. The whole retry attempt was done for the B2B. When the Power website and tells the CAP to send a get my price request to Acumen, and Acumen doesn't respond for some reason, but it doesn't send back a hard error that indicates that it will never succeed. What the CAP does, it says, okay, it didn't answer now, or it told me right now that it's a transient error, for example, the -85. Acumen is busy. It will put it into a retry loop. It will look into the profile, and it will look at the retry attempts that we just said only 1, and say, after how many minutes am I supposed to take again and again and again. So you can set multiple retry attempts with the number of minutes that it has to wait in between. So now imagine Acumen does a posting at 11 p.m. every night. And because of the retry attempts, because of whatever happens, the last retry attempt says try again in 24 hours, and it's at 11 p.m. So any other retry attempt going forward with 24 hours would automatically fail, because it always falls into the window where Acumen does something. So what we ended up doing was saying try it unless it is in this time frame. So what we have to do here, since this is really not used, we're entering 2 times, a beginning and an end time. And what we have been doing is simply entering 0, 0, 0, meaning midnight, between 0, 0, 0 and 0, 0, 0, 1 and 1, ugh. Between midnight and 1 second after, do not do retries. Don't forget it. You will get an error during email transmission or the transmission. So we saved the sucker. Acumen SOAP service is need only be set up when B2B is active. It defines if it's active or not. It gives the URL of the Acumen SOAP server and the port and how to connect to, and it gives it the Acumen site code and a password that is set up in the Acumen site. If you're looking at the e-commerce site record for B2B, it has the site code and it has a password field there, and it has to match here. And again, here you have notification, retry attempts, and delay retry, which need to be set up, but only if you're running B2B. Ignore FreeGift Premium. It's functionality that is in PW Classic that was written with a humongous amount of effort and has never really been used except for a couple of sites. B2B is active, true or false. This is the one where I said if that is set to false or it's empty, then the site will never go into the B2B basket, even if you have a B2B user. Click wrap agreement. Also something that was done in Power Web Classic for a very specific reason. It's in use on some of the sites. that deal with download items. It basically makes the Power Web Classic site to jump through special hoops, that before you can complete your order, you have to click I agree on a page with an agreement provided by the publisher. And unless you click I agree, you are not allowed to pay and check out. So that, as I said, that is used by some. There is actually a bug in the system that we were supposed to also implement it in PW10. We filed it. It was one really hot item, and then it dropped off, and it was never asked for again. Mark, it might come back sooner or later by somebody that is using. If somebody who uses the click wrap agreement now on Power Web Classic wants to go to PW10, I bet you they're going to ask for the darn thing.
Yep.
So it is basically true or false. And then it could be for all products or downloadable products only, where this is really something that is right now only for Power Web Classic. So we're going to set it, once you click on it, you can only do one or the other. You cannot go back. So we're going to set it to false on all products. Downloadable products, ignore it. It has nothing to do with CDS, guys. This was functionality that was written for a company, for integration with a company called Impelsys. If you ever hear that, they provided a really boneheaded download service for a while that we implemented before we had CDS, because there was pretty much nothing else back then. But as soon as we started with CDS, we stopped actively selling that, and Rose used to use it. And then they bought CDS, and it was the last, and we actually dropped it. So it's dead code in the CAP. It's functionality that's not used. Now we are getting to the really good stuff, which is synchronization. Here are the settings that you have to set up for the sync, for every sync. This one here, include in sync process, true or false, means that it will be included in the nightly sync. For test sites, for sites under development, it's usually always set to false, because most likely it will error out, or I will just get junk from Acumen if they are not set up. So you set it to false until you're really ready, close to go live. The Acumen DSN is the name of the system DSN that you're setting up for with the ODBC driver and the whole 9 yards. That's where you specify it. It has to match character by character. Make sure there are no spaces in there. Price sync can be price 1 or price 2. Come on. This is classic example, disaster example, new work library. In Acumen, you have 2 price fields in the product record. It's price 1 or price 2. And Acumen has functionality based on customer groups or whatever to use either one price or another. Somebody way back when, in general, for Power Web in the beginning, it was always price 1. Price 1 was synced, period. Somebody said, but we would like to do price 2. And instead of changing a whole truckload of stuff in the sync, we decided way back then that we are simply going to add the functionality, add a parameter, and tell the stored procedure that is taking the price and putting it into the price field if it's supposed to use price 1 or price 2, and the CAP will tell the store procedure that. 99.99% of the sites have this set as price 1. There are some with price 2. Which ones? I don't know. Would be a good thing to document. Convert pound to ounce. Wow, I wonder what that is. What it does, when the weight field comes from Acumen, it is a field that is just a number. Normally, customers have ounces in Acumen. Somebody came along, and I believe it was USCCB, but somebody came along when they bought Acumen, when they bought Power and said, but all our products in Acumen have pounds. But we show ounces as the hard-coded unit of measure on the PowerWeb Classic sites. So what we did, we simply added this parameter to the cap and a little switch in the PowerWeb sync stored procedure where it checks which parameter the cap gives into the stored procedure, and if it is set to true, it will take the blank value that it gets, 4, 5, 3, and it will multiply it by 16 and will store that. And I have a feeling that this is set to true for the row site.
Mm-hmm. That would make sense.
Should be false under normal circumstances unless they're really using pounds. DTS package name is the DTS package name that is set up for a site that is syncing with Acumen V10. Oh, I'm sorry, with Acumen V7. For Acumen V10, this is ignored, but you have to enter something. It's mandatory. So in general, I just enter NA. And system name, we're going to call it ROB DSN because we don't have one. The SyncDB name is the name of the SyncDB. Whatever you set up, the SyncDB user is always website, and the SyncDB password is always the one, always the one we talked about that starts with use DTS is the determination if it's supposed to be using DTS or if it's supposed to be not be using DTS. When it says true, it means sync with the code that deals with Acumen V7. When you switch a site to use Acumen V10, this has to be set to false.
Can you say that last part again? Use DTS.
Use DTS. If this is set to true, it means that the Acumen on the back end is Acumen V7. In that case, it really uses the DTS package that is being set up for the sync for a V7 site. When you set up the sync environment for a V7 site, you set up SyncDB and you set up a DTS package that is being configured to hook into that SyncDB.
Okay.
So if it is a V7 site, you have to give it the DTS package name, and this has to be set to true. If it's a V10 site, there is no DTS package. So use DTS is set to false. And in that case, the DTS package name parameter is ignored. So we're going to commit the changes. And we have only 2 left. Standing orders. Active should always, for everybody, be either empty or false, except for one site, which used to be BBCAA, which was British Broadcasting, whatever, America, Audiobooks America, BBCAA, then turned into AudioGo, then turned into Blackstone very recently. Standing orders is a completely separate application that is written based on a DNN. On a DNN site, it's actually a DNN module that uses the SOAP service that we use for B2B for some special purposes, and it hooks into the PowerWeb database. So it's kind of straddling DNN and PowerWeb, and it is really only used for BBC, BBCAA, AudioGo/Blackstone. So one of those three names, you hear that, you will see SO true, active true. Nobody else has it. The last one here, PowerWeb type, if it is set empty, it will assume PowerWeb Classic. So if you're setting up a PowerWeb 10 site, you will have to manually set it to PowerWeb 10. Otherwise, the CAP will assume that the database structure is, with all the table names and all of the goodies, is PowerWeb Classic, and it will bomb left, right, and center.
Okay.
So that's it.
Alrighty. Very good.
So what I need you to do, Rob, is log into the rows, log into the CAP on Hawk. And I'm going to, you know what, are you logged into Hawk?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to make Rob the presenter. And then you show us, and I guide you through it.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to have to, you know what, it stopped recording, of course, but I don't think we need to do recording at this point. It stopped recording because I made you presenter. So just share your screen now. Cool.
Can you see?
Yeah, I can.
Yep. Okay. Okay.
That is very bizarre. What the hell? Would you please do a screenshot?
Sure.
And send it to IT and say you can't use the CAP admin?
Yep, I can do that.
Because I have a feeling this is a permission issue. I wouldn't know why, but on Hawk, say on Hawk, otherwise they're gonna get confused.
Thank you. All right, I'll do that.
Yeah, put your screenshot in there. So how about Mark? Let's make Mark the presenter. Or what I can do is I be the presenter and I give you, yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna make myself as the presenter. And I'm going to give Mark, I'm sorry, I'm going to give Rob keyboard access. Hold on. Rob has keyboard access. I have to stay off the keyboard now. It is really, and let me push you over into Hawk first. Otherwise you're gonna get lost. Okay. So now this is your mouse, and I will stay off. I will not touch it. I will only talk, and you have control.
Okay. Am I supposed to? Well, I only have keyboard control, right?
No, you have mouse and keyboard control.
Okay. I'm double clicking on the CAP admin with my mouse and it's not going.
Give.
Do I need
Rob.
to?
No, hold on. Let me do it again. Rob. Oh. Okay, try again.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Yeah, it says Rob has controls. Yeah.
Got it now. Okay.
Yeah, it might have a little delay, so because we are basically going back and forth, so be kind of slow with it. Now it should work.
Okay.
So, confirm that you have the right Falcon, that you have the right CAP server. All of
Correct.
all PW10 sites on 371. How do you know what CAP a site actually belongs to?
Well, like you just said, anything on PW10 is going to be on 371.
Where's Baha'i?
To do that, I would probably check our dashboard and
Yes, that a boy.
okay.
You can also check, if you're in the site, you can also check the Power Web settings if it's a PW10 site, but there you know it anyway. But yes, the dashboard is your savior. So you go into
like
Update
it.
Profile. Let's check rows test first.
Okay.
So in the middle, you have that little thingy with the drop to right. Click on that, open it up, and then you carefully scroll down. PW10 rows test should be somewhere. There you go. Open it up. And you don't have to go, it's all in order processing. You don't even have to deal with the other ones once it's set up.
Okay. And
Just click on organization so you see it in the right. Just click on synchronization so you see all of those. Yahoo! So if you had file a bug, I would close it as user error. Well, and then save it.
okay.
So now let's
we
take,
got the
so let's take a look at what is actually in there. Is the rows test site being synced automatically?
all right. So would I close out of this first? Or?
No. Just look at the data there and tell me if the rows test site is being synced automatically or not.
No.
Good. So you see, use DTS is false. What does that tell you?
Let's see. Use DTS package name. It's for V10.
Yes. Acumen V10.
Acumen V10. Sorry. Yeah, I should specify.
So yeah.
Okay.
So you see, DTS package was set to NA. And it's syncing price 1. You have the Acumen DSN, which also tells you it's V10. You have the sync database name. When in doubt, that's where you find it. So that's it. So yeah, just save it, just to be safe, just to be sure you save it one more time. And now go and check the rows live site.
Okay. So should I exit?
Just go into, yeah, update profile. Somebody's gonna get in trouble. So before you go anywhere else, hold on a second.
Yeah,
There's something, yeah, but even if you had hit rows, you would be in the woods.
Okay.
When we install a new cap, because we have a new cap version, and we're talking about, like in a meeting, we need to install the 3.8 cap. We never do a new install. There is no new install for the cap. So what we're doing every single time, what IT is doing, what John is doing, is making a copy of the latest cap database and restores it with a new name. So the cap 371 is going to be backed up and restored as cap 3.8, meaning that the cap 3.8 will automatically have all of the profiles that are at the point of copy in 371. It's a cool thing, but it also means that all the junk from the beginning of time that we never cleaned out will be propagated.
Yep.
So what happened to you right now is something that cost me some of my gray hair. Rose used to be on Power Web Classic. They had a cap profile which was called Rose.
Oh, okay. So that's what you saw.
Yeah. Then they moved to Power Web 10. They got a new profile called PW10 Rose. You just basically try to get into the old one. So one of those days, I would absolutely love to, going through those cap profiles in 371 and cleaning out all of the damn junk, all of the sites that don't exist anymore. Because you can delete an organization which has never had anybody to go in and do the cleanup. I would love to get that cleanup before we go to 3.8.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a luxury. It's one of those nice to haves. There you go.
Yeah.
You got your culprit there.
Burp, burp. Save. Save it again.
Yeah, as long as you don't click back in. But you can never save too often, seriously. You saw how that user interface is jerking you around.
Yeah.
There are times when you are getting so mixed up. Wait, for example, it would say false and you don't even remember the last thing you had clicked on. It's really the best to just cancel out of it.
Mm-hmm. Just exit out and restart.
Just
Okay.
exit out and go back in because, or just get into a different profile, or worst case, just get the heck out of there. So I really hope that we get that admin interface real quick, but it's one of those internal things. As long as Min and Din are busy doing customer stuff or more high priority stuff, it'll have to wait. But they started working on it.
Okay.
So yeah, because this thing is so absolutely the pits. It used to be until a few months ago when John and I worked something out. It used to be that you could only run the cap admin when you were logging into the server on which that cap runs, and you had admin access, admin rights to that server.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody had to have Windows admin rights to Falcon to be able to even do anything in a cap. And that was, of course, not something that was sitting well with me or with John. And so we figured out that there's actually a way to have one cap admin running on Hawk and run it on Falcon, actually have it access caps that run on Falcon. But I think right now for your account there might be an issue. But in general,
Yeah,
you don't. That it just means you do not have to log into Falcon directly with remote desktop to run the cap, and you don't need to have admin access to Falcon, which you don't have anyway. So that's that. Well, so that is the cap admin with all its warts.
All right. Sounds good. I'll let Rose know that we've made the adjustment so they can verify that it's looking correct now.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, thank you, guys.
Very good.
Okay. So I'm going to send, so it's recording